Hello everybody, my name is Will and welcome back to Flyout. I nearly said Sprocket there, and technically this wouldn't be too far out of place in Sprocket, what we're going to be doing today. I don't know why I'm trying to hide it from you. You've already seen the thumbnail, you've already seen the title, and that's probably why you're here. Otherwise, why are you here? If you didn't see the thumbnail and the title, do you just click anything that's on your screen? Or do you have a screen reader? Then you would have heard the title, which technically isn't the same as seeing the title. But anyway, yeah, all of those points aside, today we're going to be building the closest thing that I can manage to the Antonov A40, which is, if you've not heard of this thing before, which I imagine most of you history buffs have, was a glider, which is a strong term for what it was, which was basically a pair of wings with a T-60 strapped to the bottom. And the T-60 is a tank. The T-60 was a tank armed with, I think, a 20mm cannon. And so the plan was to carry it underneath, I think, the TB3 bomber, which seemed to be the Russians' testbed for pretty much anything they could come up with, because they also use it for parasite fighters, which, if you've not seen, Yuzi has a video on his channel, where I played with him in Trailmakers, and he built a TB3. It's cool. That's just a shout out. It's not on my channel, it's just a shout out to his channel, who I may pin in the description now that I've mentioned it. But regardless, the plan was to strap these underneath TB3 and fly it to the battlefield, at which point it would separate from the mothership, in this case the TB3, and glide gracefully down to the ground, land, the crew would get out, take off the wings, leave them in a field somewhere, presumably burn them so the enemy don't get their hands on them, and then continue to use their T-60 that they now have behind enemy lines to wreak havoc. However, what ended up happening was it just kind of got abandoned. What I'm gonna say now may surprise a couple of you, because the project that the Russians attempted to make this thing fly with actually was somewhat of a success. The tank obviously had a lot of drag, so you needed a very, very strong towing aircraft, and that eventually became the biggest problem for this project. There were just no aircraft that could tow something this draggy through the air without massively hampering its range to the point of not being useful, or simply just not being able to get off the ground at all. So it got abandoned. The actual gliding part reportedly wasn't a problem. Apparently, it flew. It fell slowly, quite gracefully, according to Wikipedia. So there you go. Apparently, it worked. And today, we're not going to be building a glider variant of this. I don't want it to be a glider because we can't tow aircraft in Flyout, to the best of my knowledge. So the next best thing to towing it and using it as a glider is obviously way better, actually, having it with its own engine. This is going to be a flying tank entirely under its own power. So the engine is kind of just going to be strapped above the wings in the middle, kind of like the MBR2 and planes of that era, seaplanes of that era, where they wanted to keep the engine away from water and things. This time, we want to keep the engine away from ourselves. That's why it's going to be above the wings, but we're still building the tank for now, and this game obviously doesn't have the smoothest of controls, should we say, when you're trying to build a tank. So there were definitely corners that were cut, and there's only a certain level of smoothness that the game automatically applies. So unlike in Sprocket, where you can choose what angle the game smooths out edges with, Flyout just smooths edges at all points in time to a set degree, and so you can see some of the edges which should be sharp kind of have a smoothing effect applied to them, There's nothing I can do about that. I've tried to minimize it in most places by making sure that there's a bunch of points really close together where the edges are, because that minimizes how much smoothing actually occurs, but there's places where it's completely unavoidable. So it kind of looks like a cast version of the T60, so I don't know, maybe in your headcanon the French and the Russians work together to make this thing. Let me know what crazy world do you think this thing would actually be practical with in the comments section below, if you have any ideas where this would be even remotely usable. I mean, the kind of problem with this, at the end of the day, is that it sits in an uncomfortable middle ground in terms of history, where, number one, tanks were not advanced enough to really be light and effective at the same time, if you want to say that. They could be light, but once the war started to roll around, you'd need to start adding weight in order to be effective. So things like the M22 Locust were light, but in comparison to the counterparts that were available at the time of its existence, they were extremely undergunned and under-armoured, and so, in a tank versus tank situation, weren't hugely effective. So you have a mediocre tank at best if you're doing this thing, and you also have aircraft which are still in their development phase, I guess is probably the best way to put it. Aircraft were still a somewhat new concept. Obviously, they'd had them since World War I, they've been going for a little while, but we've only really just got to the monoplanes, and we're only really now learning how to get our engines out of the 300 horsepower range up to the 1,000 horsepower range, which is really what we need for this thing. So the engine on this thing produces, I think, about 1,800 horsepower. So you're gonna have to suspend your disbelief on that one, because there is no way that an engine of this era, of this style, would ever produce that much horsepower. But frankly, that's what's necessary in order for this thing to fly under its own weight. It barely lifts off the ground as it is. Spoilers. I'm sure you're not particularly surprised to hear that. But no, this is not going to fly gracefully like a swallow through the sky. It's going to fly more gracefully through the sky like a brick with a couple of Hot Wheels tracks strapped on top of it. Like, it's not exactly an F-22 Raptor, you know. But there you go. That's what you get, really, when you strap wings onto a tank and expect it to fly. However, what you may have spotted earlier, which I didn't point out while I was doing it because I was on some kind of tangent, I don't really remember at this point. Everything I've said up until this point is gone from my mind. Absolutely no idea what I said. When I watch this back, I'll be completely surprised by every single topic that came up. Regardless, this turret on this tank actually spins. It works. It is a fully functional tank turret. You can't aim up and down on the gun. I could have made it so that you can aim up and down on the gun, but frankly, this was already taking long enough. So, yeah, we just went with the old, let's not bother with that one, because ultimately, it's not too bad of a fate, not being able to aim up and down. There's nothing really I mean, we can get tanks to shoot at, but, actually accurately aiming this 30mm cannon while in the air, not really gonna happen, is it? It's, yeah, no, not without some kind of crazy setup, with, like, some flight stick and then, I don't know, a second joystick to aim the turret or something. That would be wild. One hand flying the plane, one hand controlling the turret. Man, I want to set that up now. But regardless, yeah, no, it did not. Yeah, it doesn't have the ability to aim up and down, but that's okay, because we do have the ability to rotate it and fire the cannon. So that's pretty much a tank, right? You don't need to aim up and down. You know, the T-34 couldn't aim down and only got like 5 degrees of gun depression. Who needs any degrees of gun depression? We'll just go with a nice smooth 0. It keeps things simple, you know. But yes, we are now nearing the point where visually this thing is done. So you can now get a full picture in your head, if you didn't already, of exactly what I'm going for. And I just wanted to do a little bit of balancing with this thing to make sure the center of mass was actually between the wheels so that we don't immediately tip onto the tail when we're on the ground. Obvious downside of that means that our center of lift is always going to be behind our center of mass, which is what you want for stability, but not good for agility. It's going to be very, 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 very far from the center of mass, which means actually turning this thing is going to be quite a lot of work. And this is also a push propeller aircraft, which seems to be a bit of a theme as of late, but frankly it just worked better with the arrangement that we were going for here. There was no way that the propeller was really going to be on the front without having to either be ridiculously small or clipping the turret, so this was kind of the best of both worlds, if we can go as far as to say that anything on this tank is the best of both worlds. I guess, you know, this may be one of the best ways to get a tank cannon on an aircraft this early. It's not really a tank cannon though, it's a 30mm. There were planes with 30mm on in real life. Like, that's not even... Oh well, I'll stop making it sound disappointing now, because it's about time that we actually take this thing off up into the air, and oh my god, I'm excited for this one. I hope you are as well. And here it is, the tank, the plane. It's a plane. Look, it says right here in the top corner, in all caps, it's a plane. And just to prove how much of a plane it is, we're going to fly it, which, may I add, is something you cannot do with a tank. That is a factual statement. You cannot fly a tank. However, that doesn't mean that we're not going to try flying this plane today. So, first things first, a plane is not very aerodynamic. Planes are famous for a few things, and one of those things is definitely not aerodynamics. So we do kind of veer off the runway a little bit. It's a little bit unwieldy, but you know, there's plenty of big fields back home where we can launch this thing from, such as this here desert. That's a big field, right? And given a few hundred meters of takeoff space, we do eventually start to get enough speed over this elevator, which is pitched down like that, to bring the nose up, and it will happen eventually, I swear. And there we go. Look at this! Oh, it's so majestic. And if you're thinking, oh, well, yeah, but, you know, oh, your plane, it's not functioning very well in, you know, the original intended purposes of planes, then, you know, watch this. Yeah! Yes! And now we can shell from above. They won't know what hit them unless they have like a rifle or in fact any kind of anti-air munition whatsoever. I imagine would be just dreadfully effective against this thing, to the point where this probably wouldn't be very useful in actual combat, believe it or not. I know that might be a bold statement, because you were probably all watching this thinking, wow, that plane is very, very effective in combat. I mean, like, how could you even argue it? Well, maybe not. You know, maybe I'm here to change your worldview a little bit about this one. No, but obviously, I'm pulling your leg. This is an Antonov A40, or the closest thing that I can build. And, yeah, frankly, it looks a little funky, the actual tank, but from a distance, I think it definitely does justice to the concept, at the very least. You're not going to mistake this for, like, anything other than a tank with wings strapped onto it. And I've got to say, this engine obviously is a little overpowered in order to just get it off the ground, but it's actually quite nippy once it gets up into the air, to be honest. Now, the question is this going to be effective against an enemy aircraft? And the answer to that is definitely no. However, I'm going to go as far as to say we could make this effective against enemy aircraft. with very little in the way of alterations. And if for some ungodly reason this doesn't make you happy, then I don't know what will. So you might be thinking, hey, wouldn't those AIM-9s add a little bit of weight? And you would be correct. However, in counter to that, we have added a little bit of a trick up my sleeve here, which is we are now powered by the same turbofan engines as powered my jet hybrid bomber from last video on flyout. So we have a little bit more in the way of pace. We do have to drop the RPMs on this propeller quite a lot, and there we go. We are rather tuned for the old high-speed stuff, shall we say, which means that at these low speeds, yes, not great, but yeah, we can now spawn in some target drones, and over there, that's not great. Oh wait, hang on, it's coming towards me. We are still quite slow, I've got to admit, and the agility does leave something to be desired. However, if we can just, and why are these aiming behind me? I'm not entirely sure. Let's not worry about that. If we can turn around, we can launch, maybe. Come on. Come on. Come on. Here we go, here we go. Wait, how do I fire again? Wait, what's the key? Oh, there we go. IR missile out. There we go. It unbound itself for some reason. Fly true, IR missile. Come on. Oh, I don't know if it's on track or not. We're so far away, it's hard to tell. I think it missed. I've got to say, I think it missed. Okay, here we go, here we go. We've spawned in so many that eventually one had to encounter me. And, oh no, I didn't even see that one. This one, coming up behind me, 2 kilometers out. There's a lot passing me right now, but I've got my sights set on this one. It's going to overshoot me, and we're going to hit it as it goes away. That's the plan here, and it is an absolutely flawless plan. I'm sure nothing can possibly get in the way of this work. Here we go. Here we go. Now you must... Yeah, this does put us in a bit of vulnerability, to be honest, during this window. But once they get past, look, they don't even stand a chance. We can take our time, get our target set, miss horribly with the missile. They don't call it a missile for nothing. There we go. It's locked. It's a kill. Okay, there we go. Absolutely flawless performance here from the flying tank. You cannot argue otherwise. But yeah, let's just swap back to the slightly more sane version, and we'll try landing this thing. We just gotta get our line with the runway here. So we're gonna bank the plane, have a very slow and long turn, but just got to manage the throttle, manage the angle, because it's going to be really difficult to keep this thing in a straight line while we're coming down. So let's drop the speed here so that we don't overspeed and start pitching up aggressively. Let's cut the throttle. Hopefully we don't stall the engine here, and we can just gently bring her down on the main runway here. Quite a lot of crosswind, so we got to be a little careful, and then and a perfect landing. Yeah, that pretty much sums up the prospect of any potential projects that were gonna use this thing for whatever they needed to do. I mean, practically speaking, this was never going to work. But regardless, I really hope you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and or subscribe for more crazy things like this. And if you've not tried it yet, try Sprocket. There's actual tanks in that game. But anyway, thank you for watching. I won't keep you any longer, and I will say goodbye, and I'll see you in the future. Goodbye. And as always, a huge thank you to this channel's patrons: Burning Potato, CamJam135, Cody N, DJ Pete, Skavoon, Gunmaster929, Sad Cat, Jessica Casualty 611, Lester11, Mark Modley Vesset, Nicholas K, Roll Sosbocken, Ryan Brody, The Canesian Emperor, Zerosheim, and Zeit Wolverine. Thank you so much for your support.